Sam Darnold is playing playoff caliber football week in and week out at this point. It's time the national media took notice. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day, each and every day. I appreciate my hashtag everydayers so very much. You guys make the world go around. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Today on the show, I have a couple of points to make. The first is that Sam Darnold is playing as good a quarterback as anybody in the league. And I think the only reason that he is not getting truly the same recognition that you're seeing from some of the other quarterbacks who are having absolute lights out seasons is his reputation. This is the name on the back of the jersey, and I think that's honestly the only thing holding him back from being genuinely in the MVP conversation. And while that might not be fair, that's the way it is. I also want to talk about the way the Bears defended Justin Jefferson on this one and kind of answer the question, well, can other teams get away with doing this? Should they try? How do we feel about it? It's an interesting idea, and it's one that I don't know if we've seen a lot of. It was a fairly unique plan, and we'll see if the Bears want to try it again in a couple weeks when they come to US Bank Stadium. As well as there's a little bit of a roster change. Ivan Pace goes to IR. Jamin Davis is on the Vikings. We'll talk a little bit more about that at the end of the show as well. But first things first, okay? Let's get the spicy part out, all right? It's time to put some respect on Sam Darnold's name. It's time to stop viewing him as the bust from New York. He is a different quarterback. He just is. He is not a perfect quarterback, okay? There are plays that I wish he had back. I have spent a lot of my time this year making film breakdowns on Sam Darnold. There are, I think, 5, 6 maybe hour-long breakdowns of various Sam Darnold's games on my Patreon page, patreon.com/LukeBraunNFL. And every single one of them is free to watch, by the way, except for the most recent one, which is about the Bears game that went up today. And that one will be free to watch soon. So go join me at patreon.com/LukeBraunNFL and go binge watch hours and hours of Sam Darnold content that I've amassed over the year. So I feel like I'm in a fairly authoritative place to talk about his film, okay? I've spent more time with it than I think anybody who just covers the league nationally. And I'm not going to name any names or anything like that. I'm not trying to do the call-out thing. But, you know, I'm sure that you have seen it as well, whether it's NFL Network or your favorite national podcast, or, you know, The Athletic or any of the major publications that cover the league, but not the individual teams. And this is why we at Locked On lean so hard into local coverage, because local coverage will know stuff that you just can't really get into if you have to cover all 32. So this is for the people who have to cover all 32, okay? Lean on me as your resource. I got you when it comes to the Vikings, okay? I got you. I got you when it comes to Sam Darnold. You want to know about Sam Darnold? I can answer every question you have. But the reason that I'm saying this, it's not necessarily statistical. The numbers Sam Darnold has put out haven't been, you know, world altering. They're good numbers. They're perfectly acceptable. We like them. They lead to wins. But, you know, we're not throwing 500 a game or anything like that. And that's not why, right? And if you're trying to make a statistical case for MVP, you're probably box score watching too much for this conversation anyways. But the reason is that Darnold is operating an extraordinarily aggressive offense, and he's doing a really good job of it. The degree of difficulty in this offense is off the charts. If you just tried to plop a random rookie in this offense, and I super wonder what would have happened to J.J. McCarthy. But this is not easy quarterbacking. Mechanically, it's not easy quarterbacking. There's a lot of turn your back to it. There's a lot of stuff with your footwork that, you know, you have to turn your hips like really far a lot of the time. You have to be in like very precise with your rhythm, very precise with your ball placement, and you have to be very aggressive and make really complicated and nuanced decisions at the drop of a hat. And Darnold's been doing all of that. A lot of those complicated and nuanced decisions have to do with some of the reads and progressions in this offense. The way that the Vikings have approached alerts this year is way more aggressive. And I think that's more of a Sam Darnold thing than it is anything about coaching or scheme or O'Connell or anything. I think there's the way Darnold has approached it. But there are two major plays you remember from this Soldier Field game that were alerts that probably weren't in the progression. The way I understand the progressions, I'm pretty confident that they weren't in the progression as they are drawn out. One is the Justin Jefferson long ball DPI thing, that the Jalen Johnson DPI that set him up with like 1st and goal at the 6. And then the next play, I think, or 2 plays later, was the Naylor touchdown. That one. And then the 3rd and 12 that was in, I think, the early 4th quarter that was the TJ Hawkinson, like it was another DPI, but he caught it over Kevin Byard, who was committing pass interference to convert a 3rd and 12. You remember, both of those were not in the progression. And I think it's really important to understand that. A lot of quarterbacks, not all of them, by the way, I think like the Bo Nixes of the world that are playing well and they're operating within the structure of what we are doing, right? This is the quintessential Kirk Cousins, right? First read, second read, third read. We're going to get through our progression. If it's there, we're going to throw it. If it's not there, God knows what's going to happen, but then it's kind of not his fault. And that's like the way we lived for 6 years. There is nothing inherently wrong with that, though I would argue it has a ceiling, and we got very familiar with it. But that way of playing, there's a limit to that. And that limit is when Justin Jefferson's one-on-one, but he's running a clear out, you don't get to take advantage of that opportunity unless you have the balls to say, screw this progression. I'm throwing the thing up to Jefferson. But that's exactly what that DPI play was. Against their best corner, Jalen Johnson, who, by the way, had a plenty admirable game. I know there's a lot of talk about Jalen Johnson, shut him down for 27 yards. Okay, 45 yards of DPI later, that's not nearly as compelling of a statement. But that isn't to say that Jalen Johnson didn't have a good game. Bears fans, if you hate listening to this, Jalen Johnson had a good game. Okay, go say a Vikings podcaster said that. Okay, you're fine. But the other play, the TJ Hawkinson play, was on a concept called drift, and it's a play action concept. The point of it is to run Justin Jefferson on a basic over the middle and then to suck up the linebackers with play action, so there's a bunch of room for him to run. As part of that, because of the way that certain coverages will approach that in particular quarters, if you think about, you just run a basic against cover 4, right? Well, you're going to go from zone to zone to zone to zone, right? And as you cross over the ball, the inside safety on the other side from where you started is going to poach you. He's going to be watching the quarterback's eyes. He's going to see your route coming, and he's going to sit right where the quarterback thinks he's supposed to throw the ball, or like kind of right behind it, and he's going to try to jump the route and intercept it, right? So to give that guy something else to do, we run a streak on the other side of the field. That's what TJ Hawkinson was doing on this route. All you got to do is go deep, go be a vertical stem that the guy has to pay attention. You got to respect it, right? They didn't get quarters on this, though. They got cover 3. And drift against cover 3 can work out really, really well, assuming the linebackers bite the way that they're supposed to, which they almost always do. It's called roboting. They have a whole technique for it, but they do come up a step or two the way that they're supposed to. So assuming that happens, and it has nothing to do, by the way, with the performance of the fake. It's just the way that linebackers play it. But assuming that they do that, and that the streak, the clear out that TJ Hawkinson is running, gets deep enough, fast enough, the middle of field safety, that post safety, that deep guy, is going to have to deepen and stay on top of that route. So that streak is an alert. And the key piece of information that you're looking for is there somebody on top of this route? Is it covered? Or did they bust the coverage and this guy's going to go score, right? That's basically the only time you throw this. Otherwise, the point of it is just to influence other players around and open up space. In this particular case, though, Kevin Byard, who was supposed to be covering it, stepped forward on the play action and ended up behind the route. So TJ Hawkinson got a step on him, and Darnold saw this, abandoned the entire drift progression, and then there's like supposed to be an outlet, and there's supposed to be a second read that's underneath, and like all this other stuff in that play that's supposed to happen. Nah, screw that, we're throwing to Hawkinson. Because Hawkinson has a step, and I'm going to put this high so he can go up and get it, and even if Kevin Byard recovers, which he does, he's not going to be able to make a play on the ball. That aggression and opportunism is so important. I honestly don't think, like on the whiteboard, you never throw that against cover 3. There's always going to be somebody covering that route and being on top of it. And even in that situation, it was tight man-to-man coverage. You're alerting into throwing to your tight end into tight man-to-man coverage, and you need to, A, throw a good enough ball where he can come down with it and only he can come down with it. Otherwise, you're flirting with a pick. And B, trust that he's going to make the contested catch. And then he's got to actually do it. So TJ Hawkinson has to be really good on this play too. And they all were. They just did it. That's championship football. That's good football right there. That's the kind of thing that wins you playoff games. Because you are punishing a very teeny, tiny little mistake. Playoff teams don't make huge mistakes. Right? The Raiders make gigantic mistakes. They mess everything up. They bust coverages. They leave people wide open. They get killed at the point of attack on run games. And that's why they're going to be, drafting in the top 5. Those teams make huge mistakes. Playoff teams, nobody's perfect, right? But playoff teams make tiny mistakes. And Sam Darnold has made an entire season out of punishing really tiny mistakes. You have to respect that. You just have to now. The reputation, the waiting for the other shoe to drop, when's he going to pumpkin? It is Thanksgiving, man. This is who he is now. He is a different kind of quarterback. He has proven it enough. The foundation is laid. So if those couple of play breakdowns aren't enough to convince you, watch my Patreon videos. If that's still not enough to convince you, you're holding on way too much to an opinion you had 4 years ago. Time to update. We'll talk about Justin Jefferson next. This episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. It's the best place to play daily fantasy football. I'm going to tell you right now, Thanksgiving, we are going to have so much fun. I'm probably going to have a lineup, a same game lineup on every single game in Thanksgiving on PrizePicks. And you can come join me. You can go do all that stuff. You can say more than, less than, Jordan Love yards, or Jahmyr Gibbs touchdowns is always a fun one. David Montgomery touchdowns is always a good one. Put whatever it is, 2 to 6 year favorites, whether it's across the whole day, across the whole week, across sports. You can go throw an Anthony Edwards one in there if you want to. Whatever it is, go download the PrizePicks app and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. If you get everything right, you can win up to 100 times your money, and it's just you versus the house versus the PrizePicks projections. And the PrizePicks projections can be a little all over the place, so search around. You might find something you like more than you think. Once again, that is code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. This episode is also brought to you by Skylight Frames. It is rapidly approaching gift-giving season, and if you don't want to be like me, procrastinating, pulling things together at the last minute, order a Skylight picture frame. It is a digital photo frame that you can upload photos to directly to your phone, curate, put something really nice and meaningful together for your loved ones. It's also super easy to set up, so if you're giving it to somebody that's maybe not so tech savvy, that'll work out great, and it will be a lovely, meaningful thing that they can look at all the pictures of their loved ones in a new and updated and futuristic way. The touchscreen is an absolute game changer, and the photos are displayed in HD resolution. You can choose from 5 different frame styles and set it up in portrait or landscape mode. There's over 1 million happy customers, thousands of 5-star reviews, and it's available in over 30 countries. So as a special limited time offer for our listeners, you can get $20 off of your purchase of a Skylight Frame when you go to skylightframe.com/NFL. That's skylightframe.com/NFL. Get $20 off of your purchase now at skylightframe.com/NFL. Moving on with this Locked On Vikings episode. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. So, the Justin Jefferson thing. He gets 2 catches, 27 yards. It's the story everyone wants to look at. Doesn't it feel like, I don't know, maybe this is just, so I just recorded the Crossover Thursday. It'll release on Thursday with Alex Clancy, and he asked me about all these things. And it feels like I get asked the same questions every crossover, which tells me that like the exposure that non-Vikings people have to the Vikings is very similar to 2022, even though it isn't nearly as found, like the 2022 thing, at least there was a statistical case to make. And I kind of thought that it was a little bit oversimplified to just say, well, but they're low on DVOA, so it's bad. But they're not even low on, like, it doesn't even work this time. And people are doing the same thing. Like, what the hell? And I think a lot of it is just because there's a bad reputation for the quarterback. And I think people are just sort of waiting for that smoking gun. They're waiting for white smoke to come out of the chimney that tells us when the Vikings are going to turn into the team we thought they were going to be. Whenever a team beats its expectations this hard, They either set new expectations or you refuse to believe the new expectations. You go, no, they're a 4-3. They've just been lucky so far. I don't know why, but I know it, And really, you're just not giving up on something that you thought before. I try to be pretty good about that here on Locked On Vikings. I'm sure there's some stuff that I cling to more than I should, but I'm only human and I try my best. But the way people are talking about Justin Jefferson this time is absolutely insane. This is the most box score thing I've ever. If you look at a box score, you see 27 yards, you say, oh, he must have been bad. Jalen Johnson must have clamped him. So here's what the Bears really did, okay? I'll look at the tape for you. I'm going to tell you what actually happened. So the Bears, they did a lot of what everybody does. You get quarters that's sort of keyed to him, brackets to him. You're going to get everybody very much, you could tell everybody was coached to know where is 18 on every play. And to open their hips to him, if there's a question of which way you open your hips on a drop back, open to 18. They did that. And that allows them to close faster on anything that comes to 18 because they're expecting a lot of volume over there. If there's ever a question of how to split yourself, right? If you're trying to sort of park yourself between two routes so you can break on either, you might go kind of 60-40 toward 18 instead of 60-40 to the one that you usually go to. It's whichever one Justin Jefferson is. So there are those sorts of things. A lot of teams do that, and it's very minor. It's a minor change for a minor effect, and it's worth doing, but it's not really going to be the cause of a result of a game. But that's to be mentioned. The unique thing that the Bears did, really fascinated about this, was they locked the coverages to the side of Jefferson. So what do I mean by that? That meant that they would essentially have a man side and a zone side. They would call, say they're in cover 3, and Justin Jefferson's on one side of cover 3. That side becomes 3-man match. So you would still use cover 3 principles to decide who was who, almost in like a Nick Saban Rip Liz way, but not exactly that. And I shouldn't say that it's like that because there's differences that a real coach would be like, no, it's different, you idiot. But you can kind of think of it that way if that means anything to you. It's reminiscent of, we'll put it that way, flavored like. The LaCroix version of this, transported next to Rip Liz in a truck. But it's the idea is they would have, it was usually Jalen Johnson over there, would then become man-to-man on Justin Jefferson. And he would have all the zone help that he would usually have in that coverage. So let's say he was the flat player in cover 3. He's now man-to-man on Justin Jefferson. He's not playing the flat, but there is somebody playing a deep third behind him, so he knows he has deep help. And there's somebody playing a hook zone to the inside of him, so he has inside help. So he's going to play man-to-man technique, but he's going to play it with outside leverage, and he's going to play low and underneath, and he's going to press and jam and do all the things that you would usually do if you have a guy behind you and a guy inside you. That allowed him to play the sort of physical game that you need to do to disrupt Justin Jefferson. Obviously, what makes Justin Jefferson good is a lot of very specific, nuanced, detailed things in his route running. And if you just punch him in the face right away, you ruin a bunch of that. And so that's kind of what teams are trying to find a way to do. So they managed to get really good looking sticky man coverage reps. And this is why I say Jalen Johnson had a good game. He did a good job with that role. The problem was that was not a comprehensive strategy. And while that did take Justin Jefferson's separation down considerably, the cost of doing so was not tenable. Because now you are just playing a zone, missing a whole dude. You're basically playing a pre-busted coverage. And that didn't work. And it took the Vikings a little bit to figure it out. Not that they couldn't move the ball other ways, but it was a lot of, explosive run plays and then like a couple of major explosives, but they weren't like down to down moving. They had other 3 and outs and stuff, and they just generated a couple of explosives that made it work. It wasn't until the fourth quarter, those 2 long drives in the fourth quarter, the reason those happened is because they had a breakthrough on this. And they realized that what they could do was figure out what Jalen Johnson's zone was and then go attack whatever one it was. And whatever concept they had that could do that started to be the plays that they called. So they, for example, the dagger play, the ending of it all play had TJ Hawkinson running a deep over right into a zone that Jalen Johnson was supposed to occupy, but he was locked. He was locked on to Justin Jefferson. They had locked him up, right? And the thing is, whenever somebody crosses from the zone side to the man side, most of the time, the coverages that do this like lock half the side thing will have a rule set for, hey, if somebody crosses the ball, it's somebody's job to pick that guy up man to man. And the Bears just didn't do it. It turned into a busted coverage. They kind of squeezed it, but obviously Hawkinson was like super wide open. He got to the 9-yard line. The Vikings kicked. So they very directly lost the game because of this strategy. So if another team wants to come in, maul Justin Jefferson all day, hold him to 15 yards, and lose, I will welcome it. I think Justin Jefferson will welcome it too. He even said that before the game. He was like, yeah, let everybody else go off. That's fine by me. Everybody here is happy with that. So if the Cardinals want to try doing that, they are more than welcome to. I think they're going to be the only ones that don't like that idea. The other thing that's going on right now is some injury news and some roster news. So we'll get into it. Ivan Pace, Jamin Davis. That'll be next. Today's Locked On Vikings episode is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, the Vikings are 3.5-point favorites at home against the Cardinals, but you can always go check out, say, the Bears as 10.5-point underdogs in Detroit, the Giants as 3.5-point underdogs in Dallas, or the Dolphins also 3.5-point underdogs in Green Bay. Those are all the Thanksgiving games, maybe even the Black Friday game if you're into that as well. Whatever it is, you can find it at FanDuel. And if you want to bet $5 on any of this stuff, or maybe just the Lions money line, -510, nice and safe. And assuming that happens, you get $150 in bonus bets. You just got to win that first $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet at FanDuel. You can also bet in the middle of games while you're sitting there full of pie going, it's halftime and I feel a comeback coming on. You can go bet that. You have live play-by-play, live stat updates so that you can make all the most informed decisions. Once again, that is at FanDuel.com. You can join today at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Not so great news coming out of TCO Performance Center on Tuesday. The Vikings placed Ivan Pace on IR. They said they hope to get him back for the playoffs. And there was actually a funny quote from, I think it was O'Connell. It was like, yeah, we have playoff football to plan for, so we're going to put him on IR, which is like a very hard way to say that. Like, wow, this is badass. But that might end his regular season. And then assuming the Vikings don't like catastrophically lose out, then they do make the playoffs, he would be back for that. But in the meantime, they brought in Jamin Davis. So here's what I want to do with this part. The Vikings missed Blake Cashman really bad for the games he was out. So the few things that they tried, very much things that they didn't like, I guess, because now they've just brought in another guy that's got starting experience, former first rounder, was chilling as a free agent on Thanksgiving. So don't set your expectations at the Pro Bowl level for this guy. But we'll go into that. And then I asked David Harrison, who does Locked On Commanders, what the deal is with Jamin Davis. He gave me a couple of tidbits, so I'll go over those with you as well. The Vikings had first, when Blake Cashman first went down, they just put in Kamu Grugier-Hill. He did fine, but he played very much at a backup level. He messed up a lot of stuff, and the Vikings gave up a lot of production, especially late, maybe even forgettably so, in that Texans game, where the Vikings were up by 1 million, and it didn't really matter. But the Texans kind of moved the ball really well in that second half, and a few of those plays, I think one too many of those plays, were Kamu just being a backup and just making mistakes that are the kind of mistakes that turn you into a veteran journeyman at this point in your career, living on 1-year deals. So it seemed like they didn't really like that, because for future games, the Packers game, they used Kamu a little bit too. And then that second half was also, I think, bad. But for future games, especially the Lions game, they started using Metellus instead. They started just calling a different package where if they were going to be in a 4-2-5, nickel package, it would be a 4-1-6 dime. And Josh Metellus would just take over that job and he would just play linebacker, right? Metellus can play every position. He would play linebacker. But that was, and I've gone over this in the past, but to recap, the conclusion there was there are two major problems with that. One is that Metellus' value is in his versatility. The fact that he can play every position allows you it affords you a flexibility that you lose if he's kind of static and stuck to just like being the will linebacker. And the other thing is his value is in his versatility, not in how good he is at all of those jobs. He's good enough to play at all of those jobs. But if you do just the same one, like he goes from being one of the most interesting players in the league to just like a whatever linebacker. And a whatever linebacker makes mistakes. And sometimes is a little bit too small for the position. He is built like a safety after all, and not really used to that kind of run fit, because with Metellus against the run, usually he's screaming off the edge or he's filling for the alley, and he's very used to other jobs. So that was difficult. The hook drops are different than they are for a guy lining up as a nickel corner. Everything is different. And he wasn't he was not a natural at it. And there were a lot of mistakes, especially in that kind of defensive slump that happened against the Lions and the Rams. Not good. So then, toward the end of the time that Blake Cashman was out, the Vikings put Andrew Van Ginkel instead in that job. And he did the linebacker thing. Flores knows he can do that, did that with him at Miami, had him play it more than is probably preferable. And you're taking this guy off the edge where he's wreaking a whole bunch of havoc and making him like a second level run fitter. So that's kind of sucks. And then you would put Dallas Turner in his place. And that's why Dallas Turner started to get more run toward the end and then suddenly stopped getting run again. This all has to do with Blake Cashman being in and out and them trying to figure out a plan for having Blake Cashman out. So when Ivan Pace went down early in the Bears game, it was Kamu again. And they came up with the game plan. They didn't want to move a bunch of positions in the middle of a game on a fly, right? So it makes sense that they just put in next man up. I don't know if that's going to be the way that they approach this. Clearly it isn't, right? Clearly they didn't like any of those ideas. And all of those ideas had big problems with it. And the defense had all these struggles that kind of stemmed off of side effects of all those different replacement plans, right? So they didn't like any of it. So now they're bringing in Jamin Davis, and hopefully just one for one replacing him, and Jamin Davis can just kind of like be a normal player that isn't the worst problem on your defense. That's all you're hoping for here until Ivan Pace can come back. Now here's the deal too. Ivan Pace was not a perfect player. Ivan Pace had some bad games. Ivan Pace had a disaster game against the Rams. I mean, he was like one of the main reasons that the Rams moved the ball so well in that game was Ivan Pace making mistakes. So like it's not as bad as it was to lose Cashman, but it's still losing a starter, right? You still are not going to expect the same level. There's going to be defensive problems now that stem from having a backup in. That's just going to be your life. But with Jamin Davis, I asked David Harrison about it, and he basically told me, fluid linebacker, very plus as a pass rusher. The way he put it was upside as a pass rusher, but iffy when it comes to playing his actual assignment versus freelancing. So that sounds like Ivan Pace. This is just Ivan Pace. Freelancing for a linebacker, especially in the run, at the NFL level, especially with veteran players, is kind of unless you're Zimmer and you're hyper strict and you've got this very delicate system that any guy that's an inch out of place is going to totally upend. In this system, in the Flores system, there's a little make it, take it, right? There's a little bit, you see it, go get it. That Ivan Pace, I think, had a little bit of hubris about and sometimes would shoot a gap and get caught, and then suddenly there's no gap, right? And I think Metellus would do that too. And I think Jamin Davis is going to do that. So I think he might have some of those, right? Where you let a guy through and suddenly there's a 9-yard run that maybe shouldn't have been there because we had a misfit because somebody got a little greedy. Okay, we can probably take that on the chin, right? We've had that problem with other players. It's not the most devastating thing, but it should be a problem you should expect. In coverage, if you're freelancing, you're in big trouble because this is like zone coverage. Like you got to do your job. You got to be where you're supposed to be because everybody else is expecting you to be where you're supposed to be. You can't not be there if somebody's passing off a player. That's a coverage bust. So we got to do that. And obviously learning the system and the ins and outs of it is going to be a thing. So the first game will, you would hope, be the worst instance of that. And then it wears off as time goes on. But the upside is a blitzer. Oh, okay. That makes a lot of sense. Yep. That's a Flores thing. So it sounds like a Flores backer, to be honest. That description sounds like, okay, well, that kind of fits with what, like that's the strength we want. And it's the weakness where we've shown ourselves to be okay with. So I think that makes sense as a fit. But obviously, former first round pick that's not on a team just a few years later is not going to be this is like Lewis Cine. We're putting up Lewis Cine numbers, right? Like this is the that's the tier of player we're working with here. And obviously your expectations for that should be tempered. And I don't even know if he plays all that much the first game because you're still getting used to the game plan and all that stuff. Having a 3-game homestead is always nice, right? You know, you're getting used to a whole bunch of things. You don't have to also get used to a whole bunch of different time zones, but we'll see exactly what we get out of him and how much the Vikings even decide to use him, or if that was more of a, we're going to upgrade Kamu and this is our Kamu replacement. We'll see where they go with that. And I honestly don't really have a way to know to tell you. So we'll all just have to wait and see. Tomorrow is going to be the crossover with Alex Clancy. That was a great conversation. Can't wait to share it with you. And then on Friday, we will do the Zover Under. I'm recording it way early in the week, so we're going to have weird stuff with the betting lines, but we'll do our best as well as your bold predictions. So can't wait to hear all about all of that. And as always, Skull.